At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI garbage. What's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it that way. I'm Daniel Pierce, and I'm going to be your narrator. Now, let's begin. Rena's soul, staring at a monitor displaying the orbital clutter she was paid to manage, often thought that low Earth orbit was a terrible place to misplace things. Her list tended to include defunct weather satellites, spent rocket stages, and the occasional misplaced spanner traveling at 28,000 kilometers per hour. It was a realm that punished hubris with catastrophic, high-velocity disassembly. This was why the perfectly aligned, astonishingly clean fleet of alien warships currently parking themselves in geosynchronous orbit was giving her a migraine. They were an affront to the natural, messy order of things, a set of sterile scalpels set out in the middle of a glorious, chaotic scrapyard. Unauthorized construction, she muttered, taking a long sip of coffee so strong it had started to argue with the spoon. Someone's going to have to file a lot of paperwork. An alert chime, insistent but not shrill, sounded through the underground complex. The final confirmation. They were building without a permit. They see the line, Scion. They see the perfection of our advance, and their spirit breaks. Grand Admiral Corridon's voice was a low hum that vibrated through the deck plating of the Axiom flagship, the final postulate. His gaze was fixed on the swirling blue and white marble of Earth on the main screen. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, a living statue of imperial confidence. It conquers the will before the flesh. This is the Axiom Doctrine. 164 civilizations have learned this truth from the Ninth Fleet alone. These humans will be the 165th. Subcommander Hadar, standing a respectful 2 paces behind him, nodded sharply. A procedural conquest, Grand Admiral. A fitting addition to the honor of the Empire. His uniform was immaculate as his bearing, and the perfect stillness of his posture betrayed a coiled ambition. To him, this was a graduation ceremony. Indeed, Corridon said, a flicker of a smile touching his thin lips. He relied on 2 things above all else: the unyielding logic of the doctrine and the flawless, clean data his systems provided. One hand never failed him, and the other hand had never been questioned. He gestured to his communications officer. Send the declaration. Standard terms. Unconditional surrender within 1 planetary rotation. Acknowledge their status as a world of fractured polities. We are, after all, magnanimous. The officer's talons tapped a sequence of glowing plates, a beam of formatted data, the culmination of centuries of military tradition and psychological warfare, shot toward the planet below. It was a message designed to convey overwhelming power and to demonstrate an inescapable outcome. They waited. The Axiom did not rush. The manufactured quiet on the bridge was a weapon in itself. A carefully cultivated emptiness designed to be filled by the enemy's fear. Minutes ticked by. Status, Corridon asked, his voice unchanged, his back still to the operations pit. No formal reply, Grand Admiral, the comms officer reported, a hint of confusion in his tone. But we are receiving something, a data stream, a massive one, unformatted. On screen, Corridon commanded. The main view screen, which had displayed the serene blue planet, fractured into a cascade of raw information. Jagged blocks of corrupted images, flickering static, and streams of uncollated text poured across the display. A digital scream made visible.
What is this?
Hadar stepped forward, his brow furrowed. A data-borne weapon? The communications officer frantically analyzed the stream, his talons tapping rapidly to find structure in the madness. No, sir. It's noise. Planetary noise. All of it. Every unsecured wireless network, every public data feed, every radio broadcast, old entertainment serials, frantic financial market chatter, what appears to be a planet-wide repository of feline pictograms. Sir, it is a torrent of unfiltered cultural detritus. Corridon watched the digital garbage cascade across his screen for a long moment. He then let out a short, dismissive laugh. They are flinging the trash at us. A child's tantrum. This is desperation, Hadar. They have no answer for the doctrine, so they scream into the abyss. He turned away from the screen, disgusted by the lack of decorum. Ignore it. It is beneath our notice. Filter it out and await their inevitable formal surrender. But beneath the Admiral's notice, hidden within the terabytes of cat videos and ancient sitcoms, a tiny, innocuous data packet went to work. The passive diagnostic probe, disguised as a network handshake request from a long-dead Axiom maintenance procedure, gently knocked on the digital door of the final postulate, asking a simple, polite question that no one had bothered to ask in 1,000 years of victory. What version are you running? And the ship, in its automated, ancient politeness, answered. Good news, Rinsol announced, stepping in front of a massive wall-sized screen in a bunker deep beneath Cheyenne Mountain. The screen showed the Axiom fleet, a terrifyingly perfect spearhead aimed at the heart of the planet. They're running an operating system so old its patent probably expired. We found the original manual in a historical archive on KDA-3. It still has the digital equivalent of coffee stains on it. Commander Irina Cassian, a Terran Defense Alliance officer whose uniform looked like it had been starched with concrete, crossed her arms. Her face was a mask of taut stress. And the bad news, Miss Soul, the bad news is that it's rock solid, Ren said, taking a sip from a mug that read, I run on caffeine, spite, and non-compliance. The core systems, weapons, shields, navigation, are completely locked down. We can't get near them. It's like trying to hack a brick. She gestured to the motley crew assembled in the dimly lit command center. They were the Orbital Environment Management Division, a polite euphemism for the department that handled all the weird, unsolvable problems nobody else wanted. There was Femi, an astrophysicist who thought in gravity wells, Ash and Ember, the hacker twins who communicated in what sounded like pure inside jokes, and a network engineer named Sal who looked like he'd been grown in a server farm. They were Ren's gremlins. So, what can we do? Cassian pressed, her voice tight with the strain of a world on the brink. We can't open the front door, Ren said, a feral grin spreading across her face. But the system is so old, it has a maintenance back door for the internal crew broadcast system. We can't control the ship, but we might be able to control what the crew sees on their own displays. It's a start. A start to what? Cassian demanded. We need a plan to fight them. Fight them, Commander. You don't fight a tidal wave. You get out of the way and hope it hits something expensive. Ren pointed a finger at the screen, at the swirling red cloud that represented the Kessler field. That's our home field advantage. They see that as a navigational hazard. I see it as an opportunity for some aggressive, unscheduled deconstruction. You want to weaponize space junk, Cassian said, her skepticism radiating from her like heat. Weaponize is such a hostile term, Ren countered. Proactive debris mitigation is more accurate. We're going to nudge things, create a particle storm. We can't break their shields, but we can blind them, turn their sensor displays into modern art. It'll be like trying to drive through a blizzard with your headlights on high beam. Cassian's jaw tightened. And what if blinding them isn't enough? Ren's grin faded slightly. Well, she said, zooming in on a few larger, angrier-looking red icons within the debris cloud. Femi here has identified a few dozen. Let's call them big-ticket items. Derelict station cores, old asteroid mining engines, too big for all little tugs to control with any real accuracy. Femi pushed his glasses up his nose. We can give them a nudge, he said, his voice quiet. A small, calculated push in the right general direction, but the math is fuzzy. Hitting a moving ship in that chaos? The chance is a lottery ticket low. So your grand strategy is to throw dust in their eyes and hope one of them gets hit by a stray bus. Cassian's voice was laced with disbelief. My people are preparing a conventional military response, she stated, her voice flat as a tabletop. And they will die, Commander, Ren replied, her tone suddenly losing its humor. Bravely, honorably, and completely pointlessly. Let my gremlins play first. Let us mess up their perfect, orderly little world. Let us subject them to a hostile work environment. Then, if you must, you can send in the cavalry. Cassian held Ren's gaze for a long, taut moment. The chime was still sounding its polite, world-ending alarm. She wanted a plan with battle lines and probabilities. She was being offered chaos theory and a lottery ticket. Fine, Cassian clipped out. Annoy them so. Let's see what your dust cloud can do. On the bridge of the final postulate, the view of the fleet was a masterpiece of clarity. The ships, in a perfect arrowhead, moved in silent, synchronized grace. The debris field of the planet was a known variable, calculated and plotted. Their shields, pulsing with contained power, would handle it. Minor particle impacts detected, Grand Admiral, an officer reported. As predicted, shields are holding at 100%. As they should, Gordon said, not bothering to look at the tactical plot. He was contemplating which of the planet's continents would house his new governor's palace. The one with the prominent mountain ranges looked promising. Then a new report came in. Sir, sensor interference is increasing. The density of the microparticle impacts is higher than projected, an order of magnitude higher. Gordon glanced at the tactical screen. The clear, crisp lines of his fleet were beginning to fuzz at the edges. A faint static was creeping into the display. Recalibrate the sensor arrays. Filter it out. We're trying, sir, but the impacts are too numerous, too random. It's like trying to filter the ocean. The backscatter from the shield impacts, it's creating a feedback loop in the sensors. The static grew worse. The clean tactical map began to look like a badly tuned analog broadcast. The precise locations of his escort frigates became blurry smudges. The arrowhead, the symbol of axiom perfection, was dissolving into a milky, indistinct cloud. Report! Gordon snapped, his voice sharp for the first time. Sensors are whited out, Grand Admiral, the officer cried, his voice tight with panic. The backscatter is overwhelming the arrays. We have no tactical view. We're flying blind. Hadar stared at the screen, a wash of pure, hissing static. This is not a real tactic. It's just dust. A coward's gambit. Gordon snarled, his knuckles white where he gripped the command rail. They lack the courage to face us. So they throw dirt in our eyes. It changes nothing. Maintain your positions. Maintain course. We will pass through it. But you can't maintain an arrangement you cannot see. In the silent, swirling chaos, every ship was now an island, deaf and blind to its neighbors, guided only by its last heading and a desperate hope that everyone else was doing the same. It was no longer a fleet. It was a crowd. The alarm that screamed through the final postulate's bridge was not the polite chime of a minor alert. It was a raw, visceral shriek of catastrophic failure. "What was that?" Corydon demanded, spinning toward the operations pit. "Grand Admiral!" an officer yelled, his face pale. "We've lost contact with the starboard edge, on the fleet's western flank." "Lost contact? Re-establish it." "We can't, sir. Her signal just stopped." The officer's talons trembled as he brought up the data on a local screen, since the main one was still a waterfall of static. "We have a final telemetry burst, logged an instant before it cut off. A massive kinetic energy event. Hull breach across 5 decks. Catastrophic reactor failure." Hadar leaned in, his eyes wide. "An attack? A mine? Their weapons are basic. They couldn't possibly penetrate our shields." "It wasn't a weapon," the officer whispered, his voice full of dawning horror. He highlighted a data point from the last milliseconds of the Stalwart's Edge existence. "The impactor signature, it's inert. Code, no energy reading, just mass and velocity." He looked up at Corydon. "Sir, based on the trajectory and signature, she was struck by a piece of orbital debris, a derelict fission engine block from one of their old freighters, a multi-ton piece of solid iron." The bridge fell silent. The shriek of the alarm was the only sound. The Stalwart Edge, a proud warship of the Axiom Empire, a vessel that had survived the plasma storms of the Maw of Cepheus and the cannonades of the Lachaean Rebellion, had been gutted, torn apart by a piece of garbage. It had not been shot. It had been in a traffic accident. "First blood," Corydon said, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "Achieved without a single shot fired. They are not warriors. They are vermin." His rage was cold and absolute. The loss of the ship and her crew did not infuriate him. The sheer, unmitigated dishonor of it all did. This wasn't war. It was pest control. In the TDA bunker, Femi stared at his own screen, his mouth slightly agape. "Holy crap," he whispered. "The lottery ticket paid off." Rin patted him on the back. "See? Math works." Cassian, however, was not celebrating. "That was a fluke, Soul," she said, her face grim. "A 1 in a billion lucky shot. We can't rely on them blindly running into our junk." For the next hour, the TDA bunker was a hive of tense activity. A young analyst, his face slick with sweat, pointed to his screen. "Commander, I've got something. One of their cruisers on the eastern flank. They're launching probes, small armored sensor drones. They're trying to map the field from the inside." Another analyst chimed in. "And over here, Commander, a destroyer. They're firing their main cannon on low power. They're not targeting anything. They're just trying to blast a corridor through the smaller debris." Cassian's expression hardened. "They're adapting," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "The window of confusion is closing. They will have a clear sensor picture within the hour. So we throw more junk at them," Rin suggested, gesturing for more coffee. "No," Cassian said, standing up straight, the military commander reasserting herself. "We hit them now. A fast, decisive strike while the main fleet is still disorganized and partially blind. We may never get another chance like this." "Commander, no!" Rin pleaded, stepping in front of her. "That's what they expect. That's the game their master's at. Don't play their game." "This is no longer a game, Mrs. Soul," Cassian said, her voice like ice. "This is a tactical opportunity, a fleeting one." She turned to her own comms officer. "Patch me to the Razorback Squadron. I'll brief the pilots myself." A moment later, the grim, determined faces of a dozen pilots appeared on a secondary screen. Cassian's voice was crisp, professional, devoid of doubt. "Razorback Leader, this is TDA Command. The enemy is disoriented. We have a window. Your targets are the vessels attempting to clear the field. Go fast, hit hard, and get out. Show them what Terran pilots can do." The lead pilot, a woman with sharp eyes and a thin scar on her chin, gave a grim smile. Acknowledge command. It's a target-rich environment. Razorback Squadron is green across the board. Time to go knock on some doors. The connection closed. On the main tactical view, a cluster of small green icons detached from Earth's atmosphere, streaking up toward the blinded, furious alien fleet. The Axiom response was a reflex. The moment the TDA fighters cleared the thickest part of the debris, their engine signatures blossomed in the cold of space. The Axiom couldn't see them, but their automated point defense systems, simpler and more direct than the sophisticated tactical sensors, could feel the heat. On the final postulate, an automated alert chirped. Threats detected, an emotionless voice announced. Multiple high-velocity energy signatures on attack vectors, engaging area denial measures. Corridon didn't even have to give an order. On the 24 warships, plasma cannons and laser batteries, guided by simple threat vector calculations, swiveled and fired. They aimed at the calculated flight paths, flooding the approach corridors with an impenetrable wall of energy and shrapnel. A scorched earth defense obliterated the calculated space where the fighters would be. And it was devastatingly effective. In the TDA bunker, the green icons on the screen blinked out. Not one by one, all at once, like a string of lights being unplugged. One moment, Razorback Squadron was ascending to glory. The next, they were ionized gas and fading memories. The entire engagement lasted less than 20 seconds. The quiet in the bunker was a physical weight. Cassian stared at the blank patch of screen where her best pilots used to be. Her hands were clenched so tightly her knuckles were white, filled with generations of military doctrine. Suddenly it looked like a book of children's fairy tales. Useless. She sank back into her chair, the rigid lines of her authority crumbling. Ren put a hand gently on her shoulder. Okay, she said, her voice soft but firm. Plan A didn't work. Let's go back to my stupid, dishonorable, trash-based plan, shall we? Cassian, slowly, numbly, nodded. Grand Admiral Corridon felt a sliver of grim satisfaction. The cowards had finally shown their faces, and they had been swatted from the sky with contemptuous ease. The loss of the starward edge still stung, but this brief, decisive action had restored a semblance of martial order. Some commander, Corridon commanded, deliver our ultimatum. Again, inform them that their pitiful defiance has been noted and has only sealed their fate. Their next communication will be their unconditional surrender, or we will begin orbital sterilization. Yes, Grand Admiral, Hadar said, stepping onto the holographic comms dais. While he prepared, in the TDA bunker, the twins, Ash and Ember, were practically vibrating with energy. We're in, Ash whispered, his fingers flying across his keyboard. That OS version they're running, it has a known exploit in the crew broadcast system. It's obscure, never patched because who would bother? We can't change what he says, Ember added, but we can add a contextual layer, a little footnote from the ship's own system. As Hadar began to speak, his voice booming with rehearsed confidence, the twins executed their code. On the bridge of the final postulate, Corridon watched Hadar's speech. It was flawless. The words were strong, the tone uncompromising, a perfect delivery. That OS version they're running, it has a known exploit in the crew broadcast system. It's obscure, never patched because who would bother? We can't change what he says, Ember added, but we can add a contextual layer. A little footnote from the ship's own system. As Hadar began to speak, his voice booming with rehearsed confidence, the twins executed their code. but on the bridge of Hadar's own command cruiser, the Adamant Will, and on every ship in the fleet receiving the internal broadcast, the crew saw something different. Next to the crisp holographic image of their sub-commander, a small, official-looking sidebar flickered into existence on their tactical displays. It was a standard diagnostic box, the kind of thing that popped up all the time for system updates and was usually ignored. This one read, Speaker Biometrics Anomalous, Voice Stress Analysis 9.3 of 10, Respiration Rate Elevated, Perspiration Index 78%, Deception Probability High. The crew of the Adamant Will heard their commander's confident words, but the ship's own systems were telling them he was terrified and lying. They exchanged uneasy glances. Why was the sub-commander showing signs of extreme panic while delivering an ultimatum? Did he know something they didn't? Was the situation far worse than the Grand Admiral was letting on? The first tiny, poisonous seed of distrust had been planted, not with a lie, but with a carefully presented truth. Commander Cassian stood beside Ren, her face a mask of grim acceptance. The wreckage of her textbook strategy lay smoldering in the upper atmosphere. "All right, Saul," she said, her voice strained. "They're blind, they're angry, and they've just proven they can obliterate our fighters without even looking at them. Show me the next page of your ridiculous playbook." Ren pointed a coffee-stained finger at a different part of the orbital map, a region far more hazardous than the Kessler Field. It was a ghostly band of color encircling the planet. "The Van Allen belts," she said. Cassian stared. "You want to fly into a radiation belt?" "We don't," Ren corrected, "but our few remaining ships will. The big, slow, obsolete orbital freighters we have left. We launch them in what looks like a pathetic, panicked attack. Then our ships will turn tail and flee." "Flee where?" "Directly into the heart of the inner belt," Ren said, a manic gleam in her eyes. "It's a suicide run, but it's also bait." "Bait for what?" Cassian asked, though she was beginning to see the terrifying logic. "For an arrogant admiral who has been embarrassed and infuriated by a bunch of primitives hiding in the garbage," Ren explained. "He'll want to crush us. He'll see our ships running, and he'll see it as a final act of cowardice. He will order a pursuit, and he will follow them right into a particle bath that will cook his shields from the inside out." It was an insane plan. It would mean sacrificing more crews, sending them knowingly to their deaths. But it was also the only plan they had left that didn't involve lining up to be executed. "Do it," Cassian said, her voice barely a whisper. "Multiple contacts, Grand Admiral," the tactical officer on the final postulate announced. "Slow-moving vessels, large signatures. They appear to be launching another direct assault." On the fuzzed tactical screen, a group of indistinct blobs was slowly ascending. Sub-Commander Hadar, still smarting from the whispers he had heard about his panicked ultimatum, stepped forward. "Admiral, a moment." His voice was more cautious now. He had spent the last half hour rereading the reports on their human opponents. They were illogical, chaotic. Nothing they did made conventional sense. The human ships, reaching the edge of the debris field, abruptly changed course. They turned and ran, streaking directly for the deadly bands of the Van Allen belts. "They flee, like the insects they are." "Admiral, they are heading into the primary radiation zone," Hadar said, his voice firm. "All shields are rated for thermal and kinetic energy, but sustained, high-intensity particle radiation, the data is incomplete." "Nonsense," Corridon said dismissively. Our shields can withstand the heart of a star. He glanced at his own console. A simplified environmental analysis, subtly altered by Wren's team through the now compromised broadcast system, popped up. Analysis. Regent radiation flux within standard shield tolerance. Threat negligible. Adar, however, was no longer trusting the ship's systems. Admiral, their psychological attacks are ongoing. We cannot be certain our data is reliable. For them to flee into a known hazard, it suggests they know something we do not. It is a trap. Cordon's eyes narrowed. He saw Hadar's caution not as prudence, but as fear. The fear his own systems had warned him about. Your nerve is failing you, Sub-Commander. The data is clear. Do not let their pathetic mind games cloud your judgment. We will not let them scurry away. We will pursue. We will annihilate every last one of them. All ships engage pursuit vectors, full speed. Hadar wanted to argue. Every instinct, sharpened by the paranoia the humans had gifted him, screamed that this was a mistake. But the Grand Admiral had given a direct order, backed by what appeared to be clean data. To refuse was mutiny. He swallowed his concerns, a bitter taste in his mouth. Yes, Grand Admiral, he said, his voice tight. The Ninth Conquest Fleet, a weapon of perfect, unstoppable power, plunged headlong into the trap. Command, this is TDA Goliath. We are entering the belt. Radiation alarms are enthusiastic. The voice of the Goliath's captain was preternaturally calm, even as the sound of screaming sirens bled through the comms. It's a real particle soup out here. Looks like they took the bait. We have the whole damn fleet on our six, and they are not happy. In the TDA bunker, Wren and Cassian listened, their faces etched with grim respect. A new, louder alarm started to well in the background of the transmission. Okay, that's the primary shield bus failing. Emitters are starting to slag. It was a good run, Command. Tell my kids. Tell them I went fishing. The line went dead. Another voice cut in, this one from an old repurposed asteroid hauler named the Behemoth. TDA Behemoth to command. Our emitters are fried. Hull radiation is, well, let's just say I'm glad I never wanted children. We've done our part. It was an honor. Cassian, give them hell for us. Behemoth out. One by one, the signals from the bait ships went silent. On the bridge of the final postulate, the first signs of trouble appeared not as a bang, but as a cascade of amber warning lights that spread across every console like a disease. Admiral, shield emitters are overloading fleet-wide, an engineer shouted from his station. The high-energy particle saturation is an order of magnitude higher than projected. The heat sinks can't cope. What is the status of the shields? Cordon demanded, his confidence finally beginning to fray as he stared at the real-time data that contradicted the lie he had been fed. They're flickering, sir. Integrity is dropping. 90%, 85, 70. They're failing. The protective bubble of energy that had shielded the fleet began to waver and fail, sputtering like a dying candle in a hurricane. They're vulnerable, Cassian breathed, watching the energy readouts from the Axiom fleet plunge into the red. Okay, gremlins, Wren said into her headset, her voice trembling with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. Let's hit the big red button. Cassian nodded to her weapons officer. Execute Haymaker. All stations. Scattered across the planet, a handful of Earth's most powerful and most obsolete weapons were activated. They weren't aimed at the fleet. They were aimed at the empty space around it. A coordinated launch sent a dozen repurposed nuclear devices into the upper atmosphere. At the apex of their trajectory, they detonated as massive electromagnetic pulse pumps. A silent, invisible wave of pure electromagnetic energy washed over the Axiom fleet at the precise moment their shields were at their weakest. On the bridge of the final postulate, it was as if reality itself had a seizure. Every light, every screen, every console exploded in a shower of sparks and then went dark. The hum of the ship's life support died, replaced by a deafening, terrifying silence. Emergency lights powered by independent chemical batteries flickered on, casting the bridge in a hellish red gloom. Internal electronic locks fused shut, their circuits fried, trapping crews in their sections. The ship's artificial gravity stuttered, failed, and then died completely, sending unsecured objects and personnel drifting through the crimson darkness. Across the star-strewn blackness of space, the same scene was repeated on over 100 Axiom warships. Lights died, systems shorted, mighty engines went silent. The Ninth Conquest Fleet, the pride of the Empire, was reduced to a flotilla of cold, dark, helpless tombs adrift in the cosmos. "We've got a third-stage vulnerability," Ash announced in a TDA bunker, the glow of his monitor illuminating his ecstatic face. "Their system architecture is layered like a fossil record. The broadcast system hack gave us access to the low-level data slate messaging network. It's like their internal email, but dumber. So we can send forwards messages," Ren said. "Good. It's time to turn them from a systems failure into a management dispute." On the auxiliary bridge of the Adamant Will, emergency power was barely holding. Sub-Commander Hadar stood amidst the chaos, his mind reeling. They were crippled, helpless. Corridon's arrogance had led them to this. Corridon's refusal to listen to his caution. A message flickered onto his personal data slate. It was text only, marked as coming from the captain of the Lance of Verdict. "Hadar, Corridon led us into this trap. Your instincts were correct. The fleet is with you." Another message appeared, this one from the Equalizer. "Your bold analysis exposed their trap, even if Corridon was too blind to see it. You are the hero of this moment. Command is yours to take." Hadar stared at the messages. His officers, seeing the same whispers appear on their own slates, looked at him with a new light in their eyes. Not as a subordinate, but as a leader. He had been right. Corridon had been wrong. The hunger for glory, for validation, swelled in his chest. On the crippled bridge of the final postulate, Corridon saw a different set of lies. His security officer, working on a hand-cranked emergency console, brought him a disturbing report. "Admiral," the security officer said, his voice low, "we are picking up unauthorized command-level communications between a number of ships. They seem to be originating from the Adamant Will, from Sub-Commander Hadar's command codes." The data, carefully forged, showed Hadar rallying loyal captains, planning to seize command, and paint Corridon as a failed, hesitant leader. Mutiny, the ultimate disgrace. Corridon's face was a mask of cold fury. He activated the one system still on an independent power source, the short-range comm. "Hadar," he broadcast, his voice dripping with venom. "Disengage your vessel and prepare to be boarded. You are relieved of command." On the Adamant Will, Hadar heard Corridon's order. It was exactly what a guilty, failing admiral would do. try to silence the one person who could expose his incompetence. He was trying to make Hadar the scapegoat. Corridon saw Hadar's ship make no move to comply. It was confirmation. His honor, his entire identity, demanded he act.
Fire a warning shot across his bow!
Corridon roared to his weapons officer. The weapons officer, rerouting the last dregs of auxiliary power to a single forward-facing laser, fired. On the bridge of the Adamant Will, Hadar saw the flash of light, a warning shot, or the first shot of an execution. He saw his one chance at glory, at survival, about to be extinguished by the man whose arrogance had doomed them all. His ambition, stoked by a dozen whispered lies, made the choice for him. "Return fire," he commanded, his voice cold and steady. "Target the command bridge." The heart of the Axiom fleet, the two command ships of the Ninth Conquest, tore into each other in a brief, frantic, suicidal exchange. The volley lasted less than a minute, leaving both the final postulate and the Adamant Will shattered and powerless, their command structures decapitated. The rest of the fleet, already crippled by the EMP and now leaderless, drifted in horrified silence. It was into this chaos that the welders came. The launch was not a military operation, it was a shift change. A swarm of ugly, rugged, heavily armored work pods, the kind of ships used for orbital construction, asteroid mining, and deep space salvage, rose from Earth. They were crewed not by Marines, but by welders, miners, and systems engineers. They were Earth's wrecking crew, and they were punching in. In the TDA bunker, Cassian watched the live feeds on the main screen, her mouth hanging slightly open. "My God," she whispered to Rin. "They're not fighting them. They're disassembling them." The footage was grainy, chaotic, and utterly surreal. One team showed a team of 4 work pods with heavy-duty cutting torches slicing through the external power conduits of an Axiom cruiser as if it were a stubborn pipe. Another showed a mining pod using a grappling hook designed for asteroids to rip the entire communications array off a destroyer's hull and fling it into the starless Gulf. On a third feed, a bulky construction pod approached a primary plasma cannon turret. Instead of attacking it, the pod's manipulator arms sprayed it with a thick, gray substance. The turret was encased, frozen in place by rapidly hardening structural foam. The pilot of the pod then used a low-power laser to scroll "out of order" on the new gray lump. A few Axiom soldiers in armored environment suits managed to cycle through manual airlocks. One warrior brandished a plasma rifle at a bulky work pod. The pod's pilot simply swatted him away with a massive hydraulic manipulator arm, treating him not as a soldier, but as a workplace hazard, a fly to be shooed from the job site. The Axiom soldier tumbled end over end into the darkness as the pod went back to methodically welding the ship's main sensor array into a solid block of slag. They were not killing the crews. They were disabling the ships permanently. They were voiding the warranty, one vessel at a time. The Axiom crews, trapped behind fused blast doors, could only listen to their magnificent warships being dismantled around them, piece by painstaking piece. "Hostile disassembly," Rin said, taking a triumphant sip of her now cold coffee. "I think we've just invented a new doctrine." On the bridge of the final postulate, the universe was red emergency lights and the sickening sound of grinding metal. The ship was dying. Grand Admiral Corridon stood on his bridge, a king in a collapsing castle. The Axiom Doctrine offered one final honorable move, a glorious death. But the scuttling charges were offline. His weapons were dead. There was no enemy to take with him, only mechanics who were treating his flagship like a car being stripped for parts. He looked at the word glorious as it floated through his mind, and for the first time in his life, it felt hollow, absurd. No glory existed here, only the shrieking of tortured metal and the utter, humiliating proof that his entire understanding of the universe was wrong. A message appeared on the one functional console. It was plain, unencrypted, standard galactic text. It was from Earth Command. The message was short. Power down all remaining offensive and defensive systems. Stand by. We are launching rescue operations for your crews. Rescue, not conquer, not execute. Rescue. The word was more devastating than any plasma bolt. It was the ultimate dismissal. You are no longer a military threat. You are now a humanitarian crisis, a cleanup operation. Corridon looked at the tactical map, a testament to his own failure. He looked at the terrified, exhausted faces of his bridge crew. They were not warriors anymore. They were survivors of a shipwreck. His pride was a dead thing. All that was left was a duty to the lives he had led into this abyss. With a voice devoid of all its former arrogance, a voice he barely recognized, he gave the order that had never before been uttered in the history of the Axiom Empire. Stand down. His communications officer looked at him, uncomprehending. All ships, Corridon repeated, his voice cracking. All crews, stand down. The war is over. In the quiet, surreal aftermath, small, brightly lit shuttles emblazoned with red crosses swarmed the disabled Axiom fleet. A dazed Axiom trooper, his arm broken, was pulled from a crippled destroyer. He braced for execution. Instead, a human medic put an inflatable splint on his arm, shined a light in his eyes, and handed him a small, sealed packet. "What's this?" the Axiom asked. "Hot chocolate mix," the medic replied. "You look like you could use it. Water's on the shuttle." Throughout the wreckage, the scenes were the same. Dazed, defeated Axiom soldiers were given medical aid, water, and calm instructions. They were treated not as prisoners, but as rescued mariners. The profound strangeness of it was the final, crushing blow to their warrior psyche. Days later, Grand Admiral Corridon and his senior staff were escorted to a small, unarmed diplomatic shuttle in the hangar bay of the mostly intact Final Postulate. A beat-up Terran cargo hauler drifted into position and docked with a heavy clang. A single, dented shipping container was transferred into the shuttle's cargo bay. It was filled with medical supplies, water, and nutrient paste. Beside the supplies sat a simple data slate. Corridon picked it up. A single text file was on the screen. 2 former command elements of the Axiom Ninth Fleet. From Terran Defense Alliance, Orbital Environment Management Division. Subject, Notice of Salvage Claim. Per Interstellar Maritime Salvage Convention, subsection 8, paragraph 4, your abandoned fleet and all associated assets are now the legal property of the Terran Alliance. This shuttle and provided supplies constitute the full extent of our required repatriation assistance under the aforementioned convention. Further claims or disputes may be filed with the Procyon Trade Education Board. Please allow 6 to 8 standard centuries for processing. In transmission. The diplomatic shuttle undocked. Its fold space drive, one of the few systems the humans had carefully repaired, spooled up. As the stars collapsed into the non-space of the jump, Corridon looked back one last time. He saw the vast, silent graveyard of his command, swarmed by the flickering lights of human salvage crews. Arrogant after 164 victories, the Ninth Conquest Fleet had been sent to Earth. Not one ship made it back. They were sent back in a tiny shuttle with a receipt. Cordon stared at the data slate in his hands, the full, crushing weight of his humiliation settling upon him. It was mingled with an unfamiliar, terrifying, and deeply unwelcome flicker of respect.